Hello and good morning or afternoon, whenever you're watching or slash listening. Welcome into Boilermaker Lounge Tuesday edition. I am Sam Sprunger and filling in for the All-American Grant Flora. We got Dustin Schutte from Boilermaker or Purdue on SI. Sorry, I wanted to say Boilermakers. Sorry, Dustin. It's Purdue on SI. How are we this morning?
I'm doing great. I'm just upset that during my college career of athletics playing, I could not be an All-American or All-Conference, so I get that introduction, unfortunately.
yeah. Well, and you know what? He doesn't say a word about it, but I think it bugs him a little. I'm not. I don't care.
Yeah, he's pretty modest, so I would assume. I don't know that.
Let's say it this way. I don't think it bugs him. I think it's like, that's unnecessary, Sam. Come on.
It's like one of those humble, embarrassing things.
Yes. Yeah. I'm still gonna do it though every single time, because you know what? It's not often we can say we've got an All-American that's on the team. So
exactly. I would be all in that. I would be showering in that if
I'd be wearing a T-shirt. I'm an All-American.
Exactly.
I think I have a Boilermaker Lounge T-shirt idea right there.
There you go. I like it.
All right. Well, Dustin, Boilermakers improved to what is it, 5-0, right, in the Big Ten, with their win over Penn State. Not one that we kind of expected in the fact of how close it was, but you know what? When you get to the Big Ten, 93-85, an 8-point win, a win's a win.
Yeah, and Grant and I kind of talked about this the other day, and even Matt Painter said something about it in the post game. Like, I do think that Purdue hasn't played. Now, the Washington game ended up being closer on the scoreboard than I think it was played for most of the game. But this is a team that really hasn't played a close game since November when they played Memphis in the Baha Mar Championship. Like, they had just rattled off a lot of blowout wins. And one of the things Matt Painter said is, like, you know, sometimes you get these big wins and you think you're doing great, but sometimes they don't necessarily help you. And so I think that I don't want to say Purdue was lax. I don't think they've been lax, but I do think that there's a level of, you know, we haven't been in these dog fights yet. And so I do think there's some value. And even though it was Penn State, a team that on paper, I think Purdue was like a 20-point favorite or something. The fact that they had to kind of grind one out, couldn't get any stops. It was very reminiscent to me of the Wisconsin game a year ago where they were just trading buckets. Purdue was able to get enough stops. But, overall, a really good offensive performance. But I do think that there are some defensive concerns that you look at after that game.
Well, the comparison to the Wisconsin game last year at Mackey is a great one, because in that game, Purdue scored 86 points and lost by 10. I mean, that was how good Wisconsin played that day, and there were some letdowns at the hoops and stuff inside the paint. I guess they hit 22 shots in the second half or something inside the paint, something ridiculous like that. But yeah, I agree that the closeness of the game, this high scoring of a game, Penn State played well. I mean, they shot the ball well. They shot better than what they normally do. And for the fact that they played as well as they did, they were just coming off a game against Michigan where they had opportunities to win the game against Michigan. And think about that. Michigan was an eyelash away from having a 2-game losing streak, you know, being so dominant. And now all of a sudden, people were saying, oh, this game, this team's so dominant. Can anybody stop them? They were that close to a 2-game losing streak in the Big Ten. So I know there was a comment made that there's no way that the Big Ten champion is going to have 4 losses. There's a good chance the Big Ten champion has 4 losses this year. I don't care who it is. Purdue, Nebraska, Michigan, Michigan State, Illinois, whoever wins it could very well easily have 4 losses.
Yeah, I think that this league is really good, top to bottom. I don't know that it's the best in the country or it's the best that it's ever been, but it's still a really tough league. Like, you just saw Wisconsin go to Ann Arbor and take it to Michigan. Like, I know they only won the game by 4 points, but they battled throughout that game. And Penn State, look, they're a team that their loss to Illinois, 8 points. Loss to Michigan State was 4 points, and then their loss to Michigan Their loss to Michigan was 2 points. Like, this is a team that continues to battle. I think sometimes we get lost in the fact that, like, and this is going to sound weird, like they were without Caden Mingo, so they were without their leading scorer and leading passer. But at the same time, I thought that Penn State played a much better team style of basketball, and De Leon was just, he was on fire. Like,
they were moving the ball very well.
I still think that there's some concern in terms of like Purdue's dribble containment, allowing teams to get into the paint especially when they have to play bigger athletic guards.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to see plenty of those. So, but you want to have, like, it was almost, you want to play those teams earlier in the season so you know what adjustments you have to make, because you're going to have to see, I don't know that Nebraska's I think Nebraska's probably similar to Purdue, where they don't have a lot of athleticism, but they move the ball really well. They know their offense. They defend really well. But teams like Michigan State is super athletic. I think they can give Purdue some problems. Illinois. So I think this was a good test to kind of look and see. This was because I thought this was the first time Purdue's really been challenged since that Iowa State game. And obviously Iowa State was a lot better, but these are some learning opportunities. And I think you see when Purdue's operating at a high level offensively, this is what they're capable of doing, especially when Braden gets into a rhythm. At the same time, you still have to be able to get some stops. And that was a struggle for Purdue against Penn State.
Yeah, that was a big overarching theme, especially in that second half, was Purdue just couldn't get them to get stops on defense, so they had to produce offensively. They needed Braden Smith to score every bit of his 26 points that he had on Saturday, because we didn't have any bench points.
No,
the bench was absent. And that's not to say I think they're garbage. It just, they were absent for the entirety of this game. I believe was it Jacobson, and who else did Omer have?
No, Jakari
had 2 points. I mean, those were our bench points.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so they needed every bit. And let's talk a little bit about Braden Smith. 26 points, 14 rebounds, 14 assists. Is this his most complete game? Or was there a game that he had more, control of the game, he just didn't score as much?
No, that's a good question. I thought that this was probably his best all-around performance in terms of what he was able to do, because he came out of the gate scoring. Like, he had 10 points in no time, and at one point, I even made a note of this, Purdue had 24 points, and I think he had accounted for 20. It was either 21 or 22, because he had 15 points and 3 assists, and I can't remember if one of those assists was a 3 or not. So it was 21 or 22. So he was manipulating the defense really well. After the game, like, he was asked about his scoring, because he just had back-to-back 20-point games, and he's like, "Did y'all forget I could score?" And like, was a little bit frustrated by the question. So I thought it was the most complete. I still think that game against Alabama earlier this season, he had 29 points, kind of took that game over when they needed to, and he had 7 rebounds and I think 4 assists in that, maybe a couple steals too. But yeah, I think this was the type of game where when you get into one of those grinders, you need your best player to step up, and he did that. This was National Player of the Year performance, and Purdue needed, like you said, Purdue needed every bit of it from him.
I have made the statement, and maybe you disagree, and feel free to. I'm fine with you doing that. I think this overall, like what we saw from him on Saturday, and the threat of that happening, any game that needs to happen, makes him the best player in the country, because of the fact that if you don't defend him to score, he's going to score. If you only worry about his scoring, then all of a sudden he's picking you apart. Excuse me, sorry. And if he drives, if you don't defend him to the hoop, he's going to lay it in, and if you do, he's going to dish it off. He's just so threatening whenever he's got the ball in his hands, and you can't keep it out of it.
No, he has the ball in his hands all the time, and to that point, Painter had kind of talked about, like, I love when he's aggressive early, because it opens up the rest of our offense, because then you have to account for him scoring. Whereas I guess, early in the game, if he's looking to pass, you can kind of sag off a little bit and maybe play off of him and kind of focus on maybe some of those other guys. But his ability to score and to do it like I said, it was no time. It was just 10 points, and it was like, oh, this is going to be one of those Braden Smith games.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I still think I actually talked about this on another podcast. I know I'm cheating on you.
That's what I was getting ready to say. You went on another?
I think that I don't know that there's been as much traction for the Braden Smith National Player of the Year conversation as maybe there should be, because I think so many people have just focused on the assist record that he's just been labeled as a passer. And to everybody's credit, like they're calling him an elite passer and one of the best of all time. But
he's not wrong. They're not wrong. Correct.
But at the same time, you're like, okay, the last 2 games, oh yeah, this kid can still score. He can still drop in 20. He had 29 against Alabama. I think he had 20 some earlier I think it was maybe the Oakland game when he had to kind of turn it on in the second half.
I think so.
So he's had a couple 20-point games, and it's just a reminder, like, oh yeah, this kid there's a reason he was the preseason, Big Ten Player of the Year. He was the Big Ten Player of the Year last year. He's in the National Player of the Year conversation. So
the Cousy Award winner.
Cousy Award winner, yeah, All-American, All Big Ten,
right?
Just a laundry list of awards, and I think that I think sometimes we get away from that because we just focus on the assists. But he is one of the most well-rounded players in college basketball, if not the most well-rounded player.
Well, and you've got always pronounce the kid from BYU's last name wrong, so
DeBansa.
There, you've got him, you've got Boozer, you've got all these guys that are being talked about. You've got Yaxel at Ann Arbor getting talked about, Lendenborg as potential player. I haven't seen them play in and out, and yes, I have seen them play some. They're special players, but goodness gracious, just seeing everything that Braden brings makes me think I just don't see them being as dominating or as much of a headache in prepping for the game. I mean, yeah, you can't prep for a guy that's going to be 6'8" and is going to, but how can you prep for a dude that's 5'11", can shoot the daylights out of the ball, and still, oh, by the way, if you worry about that, is going to find the open guy.
Right. And I think
special.
To that point, like he's leading the country in assists. He's averaging 9.8 assists per game, so that's the best average in college basketball. And after the last 2 games, he's now Purdue's leading scorer.
Yeah.
So like you're a leading scorer for a team that has the best. I think they're still number 1 in KenPom in terms of their offensive efficiency, and then he's the leading assist man. So basically, what that tells you is all of Purdue's offense goes through him. And so to be able to have that for the nation's number 1 offense, I think that speaks volumes.
Well, and I know this this wasn't intended to be a campaign video,
yeah.
But it just, I get that he's not the only good player in college basketball. I get that, I really do. But just what we see when we see him every night in, night out, it's just every time you make the post every time. Whenever I cover Braden Smith, he does something historic. It's almost accurate. Like almost every time he's doing something that we haven't seen before. And it's just mind-boggling that this guy he's on our team. That's what I love.
Yeah, I think, and I always say this too, like you got to appreciate Braden Smith. And I still think that you would think after having Zach Edey, people would understand that. And what that means to me is like, enjoy every game you get to watch him play, because there's probably not going to be another one. But then don't put the expectations on next season, Omer Meyer or Luke Ertl. Like Braden Smith is one of one. And it's not to say that Omer Myers can't have a great career at Purdue. It's not that Luke Ertl can't have a great career at Purdue. But don't compare them to Braden Smith. Like acknowledge that Braden Smith is the best point guard ever to play at Purdue, and he's probably one of the Purdue's got a lot on the list, so I don't know if I want to put him top 5 just yet. But he's in that conversation for sure.
We had this conversation this summer, Grant and I, and we have him in like the top 7 to 8 before he even started his senior season.
Right. I mean, you look at and that's not a dismissing what he can do, like Glenn Robinson, Zach Edey, Joe Barry Carroll. Each one more, Robbie Hummel. Like there's a lot
Carson
of really
Edwards.
great players. Carson Edwards. There's a lot of really great players. Rick Mount.
Yeah, you could put in him.
Yeah, Rick Mount. Yeah, Dave Shellhouse. Like there's a lot of really good players that have played at Purdue. Caleb Swanigan. So just I think he's going to end his career as probably one of the 3 or 5 best players in Purdue program history. But it's
not there yet.
It's not there yet, and it's a pretty exclusive club. Like Purdue's had some outstanding players in the course of their history.
Yeah, what you said about the fact that Omer Meyer, no matter what happens, let's say 39-1, it's not going to happen. But let's say Purdue wins the national championship this year. They easily could within the next couple of years win another one, and it be but it's not because they replicated what Braden Smith did. Because like you said, they're not gonna. We're gonna need 2 or 3 players to do what he's been able to do this year and leading up to this year. It just he's like you said, he's absolutely one of one. So I wanted to something that I hate. I think we actually had him between 6 and 7, and I was gonna go 6, 7.
Yeah, that does it for Boilermaker in the lounge.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you, everybody. I've just became what I hate.
There you go. That was been canceled until further notice.
Until I feel better. Jeez. Until I get that out of my system. So yeah, I mean this one last thing that I heard you guys talking about on the post game, the fact that Purdue, this was not a normal Purdue paced game. Purdue likes to be methodical. They like to really get the right shot. They're not really in a hurry. Excuse me, but after Purdue's possession, Penn State would come down within 10 seconds, probably be putting the shot up and either hitting it or getting something going. Does this, and this is what my thought is, that's why I'm bouncing this off. This makes me feel like this gets them ready for a March game where they're playing a team that has a higher pace, but Purdue is like, okay, we don't like doing this, but you know what? Let's put it down. We're going to do it just the same. And is that an accurate feeling that it's Penn State could be? I mean, with the way they're playing, they're 0-5 in the Big Ten, but they're playing better. Not saying that they will make the tournament, but a team like Penn State where they're athletic, they like to push the ball. Is this getting them ready for March?
Yeah, I think so. I think Purdue's probably seen this a couple different times. I would say Alabama is one of those teams. Yeah. And then if you just don't look at the jersey, like Akron and Kent State like to play pretty fast in terms of their adjusted tempo on Ken Pom. I don't remember what it is off the top of my head, but I think they were both in the top 100, which when you look at 365 teams, it's pretty quick. Especially
Akron was above Memphis at the time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so Purdue's in the 280s, just for reference there. So I think that there is something to that. I also think that there are teams who know, like, hey, we have to get as many possessions as possible and hope Purdue can't stop us, because Purdue's offense is so efficient that if we minimize possessions and allow them to get what they want, we probably don't have much of a chance. And so I think that was part of Penn State's game plan there. And you saw, like, that's one of the reasons why Purdue struggled in that game. They just couldn't get back in time. I did think at points that I thought their defense looked really good, and then Penn State just hit some tough shots. It's just kind of like one of those games, but I do think that that's fair. I think Purdue has played a couple of those teams that you'll see similarly in March with, like, the Kent States, the Akrons, Penn State, Alabama, just in terms of their style, their length, how they like to play, and how they like to speed up tempo. So yeah, it's a good test. And again, I know people probably were a little bit frustrated seeing it's only an 8-point win, but in the Big Ten, you take wins where you get them.
Well, in Penn State, they shot better than what they normally do from threes, so they hit a few more. I know you made the reference that if they miss 3 of their makes, that adds 9 more points to the score.
Right.
And we're not even talking about the closeness of this game.
Okay. And just for reference as to why I brought that up, because you could do it every single game. It's like, well, if they just miss more shots, Purdue would win by more. But my point
that's a duh statement, but yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The point in that was Penn State was 12 of 27, so it's 44%. If you drop 3 of their 3-pointers, That's 9 of 27, 33%. Their season average is 31. So I was putting it closer to their season average.
Right.
So if you miss 3, it's all of a sudden a 17-point game, and everybody feels really good about, the win.
Yeah. And so that's why, I guess that's why it's one of those that I'm not really extremely concerned with the 8-point victory. It's still a win, for one thing. It wasn't, they had to hit a shot at the buzzer. Even if it had been, I would have been like, well, at least we got the win. But, they didn't have to hit a shot at the buzzer. They had a multiple possession win over a team that shot and played better than what they have throughout the season. And to me, you're going to have teams that outperform what they normally do, especially in a game against teams that are better than them or nationally ranked, such as Penn State and Purdue, and such as Penn State against Michigan, a few nights prior, and so it's definitely not one of those that you're like super pumped at the total performance, but all in all, I think Purdue played pretty well during this game.
Yeah, I think they played well. I think they played well offensively. I would argue they didn't play great defensively. The one thing, because not only that, they got out rebounded. Now, this was a game where Matt Painter, they only had 3 turnovers, and that was critical. If that number is closer to 10, they probably don't win the game. And 10 is a low number. Like, they like to keep it under 12, but the fact that they were out rebounded, I will tell you the one thing that I am, and I would love to be able to go back and kind of track this stat. I'm sure somebody could do it, but I can't because I'm not smart, nor do I have the time.
It's not as simple as clicking first and second half, is it?
No, that's just me being lazy. Oscar Clough ended up being, you could make the argument, was the difference in that game because he had 4 offensive rebounds. He got 3 putbacks, so 6 points there. And then he had an assist to Trey Kaufman-Renn, 8 points. So on his 4 offensive rebounds, Purdue was 100% in terms of their efficiency off those offensive rebounds. 8 points there, 8-point game. I know it's not quite as easy as that.
Not apples to apples, but still.
Yeah, but I think that those extra possessions and his ability to rebound, and not just rebound, and I think there have been times in Purdue's history, and probably every team in college basketball, where, you know what, we get an extra possession and we're happy to milk 30 seconds off the clock, or now 20. But Purdue's turning those into points. And I would love to know, like, when Oscar Clough or Trey Kaufman-Renn gets an offensive rebound, what's Purdue's scoring efficiency after that? And I think that's been I talked about at times that, like, the little things make the difference in terms of, between being a Sweet 16 team and being a Final Four team. That's one of the things, that I think you'll want to pay attention to as the season moves forward, because especially in a game like this where you have to get where every point is valuable, those 4 offensive rebounds and those 8 points were critical in that game.
TKR, not a really great offensive day, but he was still super aggressive on the boards. Is it crucial that he gets back into the scoring, or does he need to maintain what he's doing on the boards? And if he starts scoring, I mean, is it crucial that he is an intricate part of the offensive points total?
Yeah, I think so. I think he still has to be, one of the. I still think he needs to be a top 3 scorer pretty regularly. He
doesn't need to average the 20 that he did in Big Ten play.
Correct, because he can get points off of offensive rebounds. He's shown the ability to do that. He's crashed the glass really hard. He can still be an integral part. I would say the one thing that at times Trey still is battling is if calls don't go his way, he seems to get frustrated, and then that seems to hinder his game. Now, the one thing I would say to that is it's not hindering his aggressiveness. And I think that's a good thing, because when the shots aren't falling, like Purdue has enough players on the roster where, like, if Trey's out of a rhythm, you can say, all right, we can go to Oscar, we can go to Daniel, we can go to, there's a litany of guys that you could go to. I think it's a positive that he is willing to still crash the glass, still willing to pass the basketball, find the open man. And so it doesn't affect his game in that way, but you can tell that his shot is off when he's extremely frustrated. And that's the one thing that kind of concerns me. Like, if you get to a game in the Big Ten tournament, let's be real, nobody cares about the Big Ten tournament. If you get to a game in March and he's getting beaten up a little bit, and the whistles tend to be tighter, but if there's a game where there's, he feels like he's getting beaten up and not getting the calls, is he going to have the mental fortitude to kind of push through that and still be the player Purdue needs him to be in order to make a deep run? I'm not saying it's a huge problem. It's just that there are certain times in the game where you're like, oh, you can tell Trey's frustrated.
I guess the biggest thing is can he be taken out of the game offensively with the scores and have Purdue still be successful? And I think that was pretty much a yes. We still need him to score. We still need him to score. Be a contributor, like you said, top 3 scorer. But at the same time, he can. I guess the defenses are probably keying on him more than they are any of the other offensive options when it comes to the Purdue offense, simply because of what he meant to that offense last year. And here's the thing. We've got to play a place. A, he's not in the center position any longer. B, we've got a guy that's a rim protector and another offensive option, I guess, in the center position. So go ahead. Trey's still going to score points. It's just a matter of there may be games that he only scores 7, but he's going to have 9 rebounds, 4 assists. He's going to be able to distribute the ball and get more possessions for the Boilers. So I tend to completely agree with you that this team's a heck of a lot better when he's a top 3 scorer on this team.
Yeah, there's no question. Like when he's able to score, it just gives Purdue another weapon. It gives them another option in the post. But even if he's not scoring, like they can go to Oscar. And what we've seen from Oscar is that as the game continues, he gets better, usually because he's wearing down the bigs with his physical play and his tenacity on the glass. So Purdue's got a couple options. It doesn't have to just be Trey Kaufman-Renn. And I think that's an overall positive. But, yeah, for them to make a deep run, he's got to be in the top 3 pretty regularly in terms of their scoring production.
And I tend to think, you look at last year's production from the 4-5 position, you're getting about 25 points a game. And if you can do the 4-5 position against Penn State, there was 30. So Oscar had 23, but that 4-5 position gave 30. So I mean, I know it's not as simple as going, well, the 4-5 position from last year.
Yeah.
But still, that's where Trey played last year, was the 4 and 5. So I don't know. But anyways, let's move on. We've talked about various things there. Now it starts getting really difficult, Dustin. I think it was pretty important that Purdue goes 4-1, 5-0 in that first 5, because it really starts to get hard now as Iowa comes in on Wednesday. Tomorrow. Yeah, that's tomorrow. Comes in tomorrow to Mackey to kick off a really tough stretch for the Boilermakers.
Yeah, I mean, you start with Iowa at home, who is ranked until the latest poll. Then you go out to LA, USC, UCLA. You get Illinois at home, then you go to Indiana, which is never easy. And so I do think that in that stretch there, so they've got, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games. So a pretty difficult 5-game stretch. I do think, and I don't like to say this because the Big Ten's always tough, but I do think you get a little bit of a break with Maryland and Oregon. Neither of those teams has been really good this season. Not that they can't lose those games.
Oregon's 1-4 and Maryland's 0-5.
Yeah,
in the Big Ten.
So it's not to say you can't go on the road and drop a game. But it's better than having, because then after that, Sam, then they go to Nebraska, who is undefeated. Then they go to Iowa, play Michigan, Indiana, Michigan State. So this is a tough road ahead for the Boilermakers, and it does start Wednesday night. But the one thing I'd say is kind of kick off this conversation is Iowa's 0-3 on the road. And they have losses that includes a loss to Minnesota. I know they've played some good teams in there, but they are a team that has not been able to play real well outside of Carver Hawkeye this season.
I watched the Minnesota game. For whatever reason, I had time to sit and actually collect a thought, and I was like, hey, let's throw it on the Big Ten network. And there was Minnesota and Iowa. And first thing I noticed was, where in the world's Bennett Sturts? We're like 5 minutes into the game, and Bennett Sturts is on the bench with 2 fouls quickly. But yeah, they hung around. They played okay, but Minnesota is. I mean, and I think Minnesota's better than what they have been. Like they're 3-2 in the Big Ten right now. So I mean, they're not horrible at all. But you're still looking at Minnesota, I guess we're thinking about last year's Minnesota in the past couple of years. I still don't think they're a great basketball team, but it's hard to go to the barn, but still you're Iowa. You should be winning this ball game. And I think the road plus, having them come to Mackey is a big thing. But yeah, I mean, what do we expect from Iowa? I mean, I know Bennett Sturts. I know they can shoot. I know shoot the ball pretty well. But like, what is Iowa? Like, what are they? It's hard for me to. It's hard for me to look and find out what they like to do because Bennett Sturts was on the bench most of the time that I watched.
Yeah. So this is a matchup that really favors Purdue. And I know Bennett Sturts is a really good player, so he can cause some problems in the backcourt, but their tempo is 340 out of 365 in Ken Pump. So they're going to play a similar style to Purdue. They are fourth in the country in points allowed per game. They're giving up 61.7. Now, obviously, a lot of that has to do with their milking the clock on the offensive end, getting a good shot. Outside of Bennett Sturts, Sam, this is a team that has a lot of guys that are averaging between 4 and 9 points per game. They don't really have that second scorer. But I would say how they counter that is they shoot the ball extremely well. They have the 17th best field goal percentage. They have the 42nd best 3-point field goal percentage and the 46th best free throw percentage. And I know when I throw out those like 40 in the 40s, doesn't sound great, but again, this is out of 365 teams. So they're pretty good.
Darn good.
Yeah, they are really good in terms of their efficiency. And so yeah, this is a team that is going to slow the pace down, try to really slow the pace. And I think that favors Purdue because Purdue is so efficient on the offensive end. And I don't think they really have anybody that's super athletic in terms of like similar to Penn State. And so I think Purdue's defense can kind of hone in on this game. I'm not going to say what I want to say, but I do think that this is a game that really favors a matchup that really favors the way Purdue wants to play. I think they can pressure the basketball. This is just a team that's not going to create a lot of possessions in Iowa. So if Purdue's not hitting and they can't, the other thing is Iowa's averaging 31 rebounds. I think their rebound differential is somewhere around 3.5, 3.3, 3.5, somewhere in that neighborhood. So Purdue should be able to dominate the glass. If you're able to do that and you're hitting shots, there's a chance that you get out to a big lead. And the one thing I will say is it seems like in the Minnesota game for Iowa and then in the game against Illinois, Iowa comes out dead a lot. It seems like it takes them a long time.
I was going to say they were down 9 quick to Minnesota.
Yeah, and then they were down, 16, 18 points to Illinois, and then they kind of were able to chip away at that. So I don't think you can get into that kind of hole. Now, obviously, Washington was able to dig out of it a little bit. Penn State was able to dig out of it a little bit. But when you're a team that is low possession, taking the most of your clock, I don't think you can afford to get down 12 or 15 points against Purdue. You might be able to maintain there, but I don't think you're going to be able to crawl back into a game like that. So there's some interesting things. My biggest thoughts on these, and I know I've just, kind of taken over this segment here, is they don't have a second scorer, but they're very efficient in terms of their shooting percentages. They slow the tempo down, and I don't want to say they're great defensively, but they are good defensively. Like the one thing that stood out to me outside of their, 61.7 points per game is that they are teams are only shooting 30% from 3-point range. And so that's something to keep an eye on too.
Well, and tell me if you disagree with this one. I've made this statement 0 times because I just came to the revelation just a couple of days ago that Purdue is almost like, and it was after you and Grant were talking about how Purdue likes to slow the pace, but they're able to play up to a faster pace if they're forced to. And that doesn't happen often, but it almost seems like to me that falling down by 10 points to Purdue, if you're playing at Purdue's pace, is like Wisconsin back in the day when they were defensive and you fell out behind by 10, it was like you're down by 20. because you just couldn't get enough possessions, and you had to make those possessions count.
Right. Well, and I think a part of that too is Purdue can be so demoralizing in the sense that you can get a stop, but you got to then account for Oscar Clough, Daniel Jacobson, or Trey Kaufman-Renn on the glass. And so if you get into a situation where you feel good because you got the stop, well, guess what? Then Oscar Clough gets an offensive rebound, puts it back up, and it can be demoralizing to teams. And so, yeah, I think that's exactly right. And that's why if you're Iowa, I don't know if you can't really mix things up you're 16 games in. Your offensive identity is kind of who you are at this point.
Right.
But you have to get off to a good start. Like, you can't have what you did against Minnesota. You can't have what happened against Illinois. You have to be in the game, within 6 to 8 points, I think, of Purdue at the half. Otherwise, this one could get ugly. And I do think Iowa's a really good team. I just don't think that they're like, that's a perfect example. Like this, Iowa's kind of an old school Wisconsin. Like they would be happy to win games 48-42.
Well, look at what was it, 2000 when they went to the Final Four and played against Michigan State. Michigan State beat them like 54-47 or something like that in the Final Four.
Right. So, I mean, it's just the funny thing to me is that this is such a different team than what Fran had. Like, Fran's teams ran up and down the court. They could score 100 points. They would play absolutely no defense. And that's just the complete opposite of what this Iowa team does. Again, Bennett Sturtz, he's averaging 17.5 points, 5 assists, a steal and a half per game. Like, he is a true point guard and can really get the job done there. But there's not really anybody else on this roster that really kind of scares you. And that's not to say guys can't have good games, but there's not that other guy that you look at and you say, we got to account for him or he's going to go off. I think they do have some of those players. But the one thing I will say is that they do have 3 different guys, and basically 4, because Sturtz is at 39.5%. They do have 4 different guys who are shooting 40% from 3. So you do have to account for the perimeter shots.
Well, and is it Maniawu? Is that how you say his last name?
Yes.
Maniawu. He's their top rebounder at 4.7. So like that tells you they don't. While they rebound the ball, they don't do it at a very high clip with one guy. Like, TKR is averaging 10. He's six defense and basically 6 defense, 4 offensive. That he's hitting both sides, and it's looking like Maniawu is at 3 and 2 basically.
Yeah,
defensive and offensive. So I don't know. This could be a definite, if Purdue can dominate the boards, that may be the difference, I think.
Yeah, and I there's no reason they shouldn't be able to dominate the boards in this type of game. Like, there's not – the one thing that could throw you off a little bit is if Iowa's just hitting everything. And in those situations, it just doesn't create a lot of rebounds. So there's a situation where Purdue doesn't win the rebounding battle. But in terms of just like physical, got to get, I think Purdue has a major advantage in that category, because this is like their second leading rebounder is Tavion Banks, who's a guard. I mean, he's obviously a pretty good guard, and he has some size. He's 6'7", so not a lot of people have that 6'7" guard label. But so they do have some guys that can rebound, but it's not this at the same level as Purdue. And again, sometimes these numbers can be a little misleading. I shouldn't probably look at the 31.6 because, again, low possession, you're not going to have nearly as many rebounds. They are holding opponents to under 30 rebounds per game. So I don't know if you can look at it and just say, Purdue's averaging 40, they're averaging 31. Purdue should dominate the glass. But I just think in terms of their overall physicality, I haven't seen anybody that stands out to me that's going to give Oscar Clough, Trey, or Daniel Jacobson a ton of problems on the glass.
Let's say it this way. When I watched the Minnesota game, the Iowa-Minnesota game, Minnesota was giving them fits on the board. So the fact that and it's not apples to apples, but when Purdue played Minnesota in that second half, they dominated them on the boards in every facet of the game. Granted, different place that they played, but still, the fact is the team they played is a common opponent, and Purdue was able to be out physical Minnesota, and it sure looked like Minnesota was out physicaling Iowa when they played each other, especially on the boards.
Yeah, I think the one thing too, and this is going to be similar to Penn State, Iowa has, it looks, let's see, I'm going to count because this is great podcast material. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. They have 9 guys. So they have a 9-man rotation, and 9 of those guys are all averaging more than 10 minutes per game. And so, well, actually, they got 10 guys that are averaging, but a couple of guys have missed some time. But point being is that the one thing that I think you can counter with Purdue and is if you have enough fresh bodies. There are some teams that Purdue has played where they just have 7 guys and Purdue can just wear them down. I don't know that you're going to be able to wear down Iowa in the same way because they can continue and Ben McCollum's comfortable, with that 8-9-man rotation. So they can probably keep some bodies fresher, which would help them on the glass, at least in some capacity. But
unless it gets out of hand and they've got to go back to their rotation. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true. And we've seen that before. But there's, outside of Bennett Sturts, nobody's logging a ton. Everybody's like right around that 20-minute mark in the starting rotation. Bennett Sturts is at 35. And what, I don't know Koch's first name off the top of my head. It's too early. Cooper Koch is averaging like 25, 26 minutes per game. But that's outside of that, everybody's right around that, 18 to 20-minute mark. And so just expect a lot of substitutions. They're going to stay fresh. And I would say for the most part, Purdue tends to stay pretty fresh. But in that game against Penn State, they had to ride with their starters for a majority of that game. Part of the reason Purdue didn't have a ton of bench points is because they couldn't have those guys on the floor because Braden was outstanding. Oscar was outstanding. You just couldn't pull those guys out.
Well, and CJ.
CJ was outstanding.
Fletch, like they all scored. TKR was the only one that didn't score in double digits, but yet you couldn't take him off the floor because of what he was doing on the boards. Like it was just, this was one of those. The game against Penn State was a perfect storm of okay, we're clicking so well. We need to keep these guys on the floor as long as possible to keep things going. And honestly, hindsight 2020, it was the perfect and correct decision to make because everybody from that starting lineup was doing something dominantly, exceedingly well. So
in some of those games, like we talk about Purdue's depth and you look at 4 bench points, and I think people probably are like a little bit concerned by that. But at the same time, how many times has the bench scored 35, 40 points?
Yeah.
Like sometimes you just have to have your starters do them. I don't know that you ever want them to have to score 89 of 93 points.
No,
but it's great. It's really good that Purdue has that ability that those guys can, we're not getting much production. We're all playing really well. We can go out and we can score that many points and basically win up. They won that game with their starting 5. Like their starting 5 outscored Penn State 89-85.
Let's say it this way. You don't want that day in and day out, but you want the capability. You know what I mean?
True, yeah.
And that's exactly what we got out of them on Saturday was the capability to win a ball game against the team that was, playing very well. They're playing well. They're 0-5. How many teams can you say, wow, they're 0-5, but they've played really well lately? To lose to Illinois, which it was an 8-point, was it 8 or 10 that they lost?
It was
Illinois?
8 points, but it was kind of like the Washington game for Purdue
where they worked their way back into it.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but still play relatively well against Illinois, then almost beat Michigan, then come to Mackey and play Purdue to an 8-point game where, they needed every point they're playing well, even though they're 0-5 in the Big Ten. It just, it's of course it is, of course the Big Ten, one of their 0-5 teams is going to be one that disrupts the apple cart.
Yeah, I do think I think Penn State. Now let me look at their schedule really quick because I don't know. Just because I want to make this statement, I think, man, Michigan's on the road, Nebraska's on the road. I was going to say they were going to upset a ranked team, but I don't know that they will because they don't play. They don't have really any left. The toughest part of their schedule.
If
is
Iowa gets
them.
better, they might and get into that bottom part. Or if they play IU, at Penn State, they might work their way back into the bottom part of the rankings at least.
They play at Michigan in February, and then they play at Nebraska. I would say maybe at Nebraska would be their best shot, just because Nebraska's. I think Nebraska's similar to Purdue in terms of like they don't have a lot of athleticism. They just do what they do extremely well in their operations.
And they've got experience. That's to say they're old.
Yes, correct. Whereas Michigan, I think, probably at home, and I know they just lost to Wisconsin, but I think Penn State is going to. I think at some point they're going to rattle off 4 or 5 straight wins, and they look like a really good team. I think they're a good basketball team, and maybe not good, better than I think.
They're middle of the road Big Ten right now at best.
Yeah.
But that's good enough to play against the top tier teams of capability of playing with them. Yep, I agree. Like if they were to exceed their expectations, they might finish 7th or 8th in the Big Ten. That's not where they're going to be because they've already lost 5 and they're going to lose more going forward. But they're going to play some good basketball, which they've started doing, and without their leading scorer. So Penn State is definitely one, and Grant and I talked about it because I was expecting a much more dominant game, and Grant said, but as of late they've been playing very well, and I'm like, yeah, you're right, but still, so they played better than what I was expecting, and I know we went back to Penn State, but you can only talk about so much about Iowa because they just they're very similar, like you said, very similar in style and pace as Purdue, but I think we both agree that if Purdue does what they normally do, they're going to win this game on Wednesday.
Yeah, I think so. Like I said, to me the biggest key is how does Iowa start this game? If Iowa comes out and they are down 10 to 12 points immediately, it's probably good night. Even though we've seen them work their way back into games, and we've seen Purdue kind of let their foot off the gas in the last 3 games now, really, it seems like.
Right.
But at the same time, like Iowa's capable of, they could have a performance where in the first half, they go 14 to 20 and are hanging right in there. So this is an interesting game. I do think Purdue's the better team. I think they have more talent, but Iowa's they're going to be hungry because they're just coming off of a loss to Illinois. They've already dropped a couple games. They're on a 2-game losing streak. So they're going to be hungry to get back on the winning side.
But one thing you also got to look at is they had a 20-some point lead on UCLA at home, and UCLA fought back within 4. So they have the capability of giving up a run as well. So even if they do develop some sort of a lead, which do I anticipate it? No. Is it possible? Sure. But and that horrible name of the state that they're in just does not bode well when last time a team from that state came into Mackey, they decimated. Could it happen? Sure. But at the same time, Iowa has shown the capability of blowing a big lead as well. They can go just as cold as they can be hot.
Here's one thing that this has nothing to do really with the basketball being played, but this is also going to be the first game back for the Paint Crew, and I do think that that's going to make a difference. Yes. I legitimately think that's going to make a difference in terms of the energy, and if Purdue can hit a couple shots early and they feed off that juice, I think that's where I think the difference can be made.
Well, and I was there for the Washington game. You and I were there for Washington. You and Grant were there for Penn State. Those didn't seem, or at least for me, the Washington game definitely didn't seem as loud as what it had been for other games that I'd been there when the Paint Crew was there. Was it the same on Saturday as well, where it got loud, but it wasn't as loud as what those guys what the Paint Crew puts up?
Correct. There were some moments that were a lot louder, and I think I still think part of the reason, obviously not having the Paint Crew there, but also so you have an older attendance, like age, and that game's at 8:30, and people are just like, why are we here at some point? And so there was a little bit more energy in the building.
There was a couple of times I raised my hand up.
Yeah, I was the same way. But since it was a little bit of an early tip, people had more energy, and there were a couple more runs in that game where people really got loud. And there was a few times actually Grant turned around and looked at me like, he's like, oh, this place is bumping a little bit. And I
Yeah.
was like, yeah. And so it was a little bit better, but obviously there's nothing that really replicates the environment as to when the paint crew is there.
Yeah. Well, I sure hope that Iowa, and I wish no ill will on the Hawkeyes except for when they play the Boilermakers. So I hope they start out slow like they normally have, and this turns into a ugly early game, and then Purdue keeps the foot on the pedal. Now, do I want them to be tested throughout the season? Absolutely, but I always, as a fan in me, I always want them to blow out whoever it is they're playing.
Sure.
But when it comes to being, logically in my head, which doesn't often compute, it might do them some good, to be tested like they were against Penn State, like they, like Washington came back at them, Wisconsin. That game was over. Now, do I think it changes if Braden Smith doesn't break the record during that? And probably they might win by close to 20 rather than the 16, and that 16
close to 20, they only win by 16.
Yeah, well, I say that because they were up by 25 and they got it down to 11. That's why but you know what I mean. Closer to 20 and maybe even more if that doesn't happen, because even Braden admittedly said for those last 8 minutes I didn't really know where I was. So
right.
Special circumstances happen. That happens. So I'm kind of giving them a pass on the Wisconsin part of it. But they've got to be able to keep the foot on the gas, and that's what I want to be able to see against a good, solid team like Iowa. If they can get a big lead and just keep the foot on the gas and just keep on pushing through.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what you want to see from Purdue, because the last 3 games have kind of let off, and so if you want to see some level of improvement, obviously the defensive end, but I think you want to see them play a complete 40 minutes. And I do wonder if now the fact that they were pushed by Penn State, basically the entire game, if we see a little bit different of that killer mentality, and it's going to be interesting. I think this is, like you said, this is the start of really now getting into the top tier of Big Ten play, and you got some tough games coming up. So you want to start this stretch off with a positive and get a win at home against Mackey. And if you can do it in convincing fashion, then even better.
Well, 39-1's not gonna come easy, Dustin. Not at all. But 6:30 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow on Big Ten Network. The number 5 Purdue Boilermakers, 15-1 overall, 5-0 in the Big Ten. They host the Iowa Hawkeyes at 12-4, 2-3 in the Big Ten. Definitely one of those records that I'm not shocked, but I'm kind of taken aback a little because of just the talk that Iowa could be a lot better than they were last year, and they're still sitting here at a 2-3 record, and hopefully 2-4 after tomorrow. That's kind of weren't we here last year, and that's why they made the change? Yeah. They're better than that. They've hit a stretch where they're playing now. Don't get me wrong, they hiccuped against Minnesota, but they're better than that. They were ranked for a reason. So, but 6:30 p.m. tomorrow, Big Ten Network, Purdue and Iowa. So that brings us to the end of today's extended version of Boilermaker Lounge. But for Dustin Schutte, I'm Sam Sprunger. We'll see you on Friday.